Another set of bad news is hitting the World of Warcraft private server community, and I'm here to talk about it. This video is also going to showcase some of the Warlock spells in version 0.5.3, as well as a little bit of how old Ironforge used to look. As you may or may not have heard, yesterday or 2 days ago, Project Epoch members have been served a cease and desist letter by Blizzard. Project Epoch obviously being one of the custom Classic Plus private servers that have garnered a lot of hype in the past months or so, the other being Turtle WoW. There's actually 2 videos covering those servers on my channel, so if you're interested in that, you might as well go and check it out afterwards. However, Project Epoch members have been served cease and desist letters by Blizzard personally. It's similar to the case with Turtle WoW, actually. With Turtle WoW, we have both their umbrella, their organization itself is being sued, and also individuals that are managing and running that organization. In the case of Project Epoch, you have individuals being served those letters, which also have now stated that said individuals are going to be ceasing any kind of operation that is to do with Project Epoch, meaning that they're gonna stop working on the project. That, however, doesn't mean that the project itself is gonna die. Project Epoch was forced a couple weeks or months ago to actually merge with Ascension WoW, because Ascension WoW, another custom WoW server provider, has better infrastructure to support the hype that was around the Project Epoch release, which meant that on the first release, actually, the servers didn't work. So they kind of started cooperating with Project Ascension and are now under the Ascension umbrella. And the Ascension team now has actually put out a statement saying that they will continue developing and working on Project Epoch in the scope and within the vision of the original Project Epoch team. The existing Project Epoch roadmap will be brought to fruition, and Project Ascension is going to continue operating the server with business as usual, because as a matter of fact, only the developers for Project Epoch have been served the cease and desist letters. Project Ascension for now seems fine. I did read some talk around the internet that apparently Blizzard was already trying to take action against Project Ascension in the past, but unsuccessfully. Maybe they didn't pursue it because it was too much of a hassle. Perhaps Project Ascension servers are also hosted in Russia or in a country that's hard to reach for Blizzard. However, I do think that if any private server really gets too big for Blizzard and is too much of a hassle, then they will probably be able to take it down if they so choose. It's just a matter of how many resources they actually want to invest into it. And Project Ascension previously had not really competed with Blizzard as directly and as openly as some of the current Classic Plus projects are competing with Blizzard, because Project Ascension was mainly known for its custom WoW server that has a classless system, a little bit similar to, I guess, Path of Exile, if you will, where you could build any kind of class out of all the available talents and abilities in the game, which is quite interesting. I tried it like a couple of years down the road. I did try it a little bit, but yeah, it wasn't for me. But if that's your kind of thing, then I think it's quite enjoyable and it's very well made, I think. But I can't say much about the mechanics of Project Ascension. But yeah, that's why I think, in any case, that Project Ascension is not maybe being as prominently targeted by Blizzard, because they're not really competing as directly with the Blizzard's product. However, with them continuing to operate Project Epoch as they said they will, I think they might be in for a surprise, maybe not. We'll see about that. It's very hard to tell, obviously, what's actually going to happen with Project Ascension. However, Project Epoch, as I said, the devs that have been working on it for years and years, and you really have to feel a little bit bad for them, because they've been developing this thing for a couple of years now. And now that it's finally out, they're being forced to, well, stop working on their project, which is a shame, but that's the risk you take. If you even with some mods in the past, there have been mods for even single player games that have been served cease and desist letters because they were too ambitious or someone had a problem with them. So any fan-made modification, that's always on the horizon if you are unlucky, I suppose, and the developers don't take kindly to whatever you're trying to do. For what that actually means going forward, though, and I think that's finally we have to talk about the elephant in the room here, which is that, before we got the classic 2019, the classic remake, Blizzard actually started shutting down a lot of the biggest server that was out there for classic back then, which was Nostalrius, as you probably are familiar with. Nostalrius was maybe one of the reasons, or the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, in the sense of Blizzard finally caving in and actually giving us classic, because the massive success that Nostalrius enjoyed actually meant that, Blizzard saw that, a classic remake might be feasible, but for that to happen, they obviously had to get rid of their biggest competitor, which was obviously Nostalrius. So they offered the Nostalrius team, I think, a trip to their HQ, maybe even, dangled the possibility of getting them jobs, it's just for them to shut down the server, which they complied with, and they shut down their server. And with that, the road was clear for Blizzard to actually develop its own classic, which we got in 2019, and they have since re-released, I don't really know how many times, but a couple of times, that's for sure. And anyway, so right now all signs, in my opinion, are pointing to a Classic Plus sort of Blizzard endeavor in the future. I'm not sure how they're going to do that. Obviously, they don't disclose how big the Classic team exactly is, but I don't think it's too many people working on that. Maybe they aim to change that. Maybe they aim to change that in the future. What do we know? I'm not sure about that. But just from the steps that they're taking legally and how viciously they're coming down on private servers. And now I'm not saying it's not justified. Everybody has their opinion on it. Private servers good, private servers bad. My opinion is just that I barely play any games unmodded if it's a single player game, and there's a good reason for that, because if someone, works on something out of the passion of their heart, then a lot of the time they actually are able to accomplish great things. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But of course, people do see that critically. It's always been a very contentious topic, but since they're coming down as hard on those two Classic Plus private servers, one might think or be led to assume that perhaps they're actually getting ready to release their own project for Classic Plus. As we all know, Seas of Discovery has been going in that direction. I personally didn't enjoy it a whole lot. Yeah, I don't know. People are saying they were using Seas of Discovery to test things for Classic Plus, yada, yada, yada. Man, those runes really weren't, the most exciting thing. I think once you got it, you got it. It's 5 minutes of putting it into Wowhead, and then you know where to look for it, and you kind of need those runes anyway, because otherwise you're way behind the power creep, and it's a whole thing, So would a Classic Plus made by Blizzard ever reach the true feeling of Classic Plus as provided by, for example, Turtle WoW, minus obviously the donation shop? I kind of doubt it. I'm not very hopeful for that personally. A big thing of Turtle WoW being interesting is also the limited documentation that was available. I already mentioned that in my first Turtle WoW video, how the fact that, they keep the database down after a big content update for a month or something, so people can't just Google everything and just figure everything out by themselves. But also, obviously, the fact that Turtle WoW is a lot less popular with people as, for example, a Classic Plus made by Blizzard would be. So even if they didn't have database access for a couple weeks or months, just by word of mouth, by virtue of content creators probably taking an interest in Classic Plus, sites like Wowhead, Icy Veins, etc., there would be a plethora of documentation and also coverage on the subject, which would spoil a lot of people's experience. But these days, I think very few people are actually prepared to go into a game blind. They have better things to do. They just want to actually sit down and game and enjoy and do it in a somewhat efficient way. And so that's why people, I think, are very much driven towards guides these days and tutorials and stuff that helps them figure things out. And as soon as there's a certain player base, then obviously a certain amount of players, then obviously, you get content made for it. And then stuff that people put on YouTube suddenly becomes common knowledge or even must-know knowledge for the meta as the meta evolves, which is a cool thing to see, I suppose, but it's not, Classic or vanilla at least wasn't really about that, as I remember it at least. So given that factor, and also given the factor that official Blizzard servers are horribly policed, The automated ticketing system is absolute trash. Whenever I have an issue, it's very hard to actually reach out to someone that, you know, is a human, someone that can also help you with your problem, someone that has the capacity and the resources to help you with your problem, because there's very, very, very few game masters. Bots are running rampant. You know, you just do a /who Stratholm on any given classic edition that's currently out by Blizzard, and you'll see 5-man groups of bots farming Stratholm. Yeah, I mean, you know, we all saw the videos about fly hacking and the Burning Crusade when that came out. People just flying through, I think, slave pens it was, opening chests, mining nodes all over the map from underneath the ground. It's not going to be pretty. Like, you know, if you play a Classic Plus for yourself, just by yourself, not comparing with people, you know, buying gold, not comparing with people buying boosts, not comparing with people AoE grinding to level 60 in a minimum amount of time, then it might be a classic experience for you. You know, I'm not gonna say that people should play the game this way or that way, or, you know, that min-maxing it and grinding super hard isn't fun. I've been there, you know, I've raided in a pretty good guild. I've done speedruns. I've done all that, and it's a fun way to play the game, but it's not, you know, at the end of the day, it's not what sustains me playing Classic Plus, or Classic for that matter. So we'll see how much room there is for that. I mean, again, I could go over and over about Season of Discovery, and for example, just the rep event for Ashenvale in the first phase being horrible for the enjoyment of the game, because you finally hit level 25 and you were able to experience this new bracket on max level and just kind of, you know, see the world with new eyes, I guess, and do all those dungeons and kind of go for your biz. But actually, you were forced to stand in Ashenvale every 3 hours if you wanted to get that rep up, you know, in time for the season to be over. Because if you've ever ranked, then you probably know just as well as I do that the Worst Gulch reputation might actually be worse than the Arathi Basin one in terms of grinding. So if you kind of missed out on that phase 1 grind, man, you know, that felt bad if you actually had any inclination of taking it all the way. And so you were forced to do that repetitive task, and, you know, it felt like retail and it didn't feel like Classic to me, and that's why I quit personally. So with that rant out of the way, we'll see, you know, we'll see how it goes. We'll see what Blizzard does, but I remain skeptical, and I am gonna die on that hill of, you know, responsible piracy, I suppose, when it comes to custom-made projects that don't ask money for their existence or for their contributions to actually be supported by the consumer, because at the end of the day, they're doing a service for us. If that service that's being provided is better than the one that's being put out by official channels, I think at the very least what it does is it raises expectations on the side of the consumer, and that also means that, you know, corporations such as Blizzard have to up their game and deliver a better product to the player. So all in all, I think that in a way, private servers are kind of good for any kind of game, or also, well, is more broadly spoken, I think modifications, modding is essential for any kind of game to be as good as it can be, because if you have paid developers on the one hand and then just, you know, unpaid enthusiasts on the other, and the latter actually delivers a better product, then, you know, there's something kind of wrong with that. And I think, if anything, that's why private servers are here to stay, and they always are gonna be, you know, they'll never die out. And I think they also aren't the worst thing in the world to exist. That's my take. It might be a hot take. I'm ready for you guys in the comments as always. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again really soon.